I've been meaning to film this video for 5 years. The left and the right are just two wings of the same body. We want the same thing at the core. I was on the left. Learning what I did to become more centrist is exactly why I became more feminine in the first place, which is why I want to share this on this channel. It has everything to do with my drive to become more of who I am biologically. Not to say that an unbiological way of life is immoral either. There is no good and bad when it comes down to what we want to lead with. One day I got brave enough to ask, what would my life look like if I stopped making decisions out of fear? I began to get curious. And this is the key in this video. I'm not going to tell you absolutely everything I now believe because you wouldn't believe it if I told you, just like I wouldn't have. You need to ask questions yourself and do your own research to be able to change slowly, because it took me years, your identity around the foundational beliefs that we grew up with. Believing that everybody else around me meant well is what led me to true deception, not only on a relationship level with friends, with boyfriends, but also at a government level, and really relying on the fact that I would be taken care of when I absolutely was not. I have to be there for myself, just like we all need to do. We need to guard our own heart. We need to make our own decisions in life, and nobody's going to hand out free stuff. It just does not work that way in life. So I actually was able to see how I'm close to the survival line, as are you. And the more we realize how life is down to every single moment we can be more present, the more we get to actually live. Otherwise, we're dead far before we lose a pulse. So I'm going to start by telling you the core beliefs that each party has, which generates our differences, but also after the core similarities and the heart of the matter that each of us really craves. We need to know the difference between our intent and our impact and do our best to balance it. I feel we've forgotten the virtue of tolerance, whereby we can lead in a world kindly and in a friendly way among other people, but also the reality of legacy, the reality of what we leave behind when we're gone. Living true to that in the very few years we have on this earth is what I want to remind you of. What I want to promote in this video is a feeling that you don't need to have a story that generates fear in you, because that is actually what creates illness in this life. You want to give yourself as much of a barrier from the external world, as much of a detachment from anything that occurs, that your bubble of your integrity, of your essence, is never popped. You're always safe. You always have that resilience at your core and your soul is intact. So really look at both sides that I'm telling you and generate a story that actually protects who you are and your spirit. I'm not talking about your ego here. Let's try to be kind in the comments. This is coming from a place of genuine look at what your beliefs are and see if they actually serve you and your opportunity and your children's opportunity. Welcome to Devoted to Extraordinary, where today is the first, last, only, and best day of our entire lives. And if you truly believe the same and want to become a feminine woman who is in her vitality and filled with virtues, subscribe. Also join me at the Substack, where I write everything that's in these videos weekly. I started the Eco Society at my university. I was parroting that everybody else also had to take this responsibility and this weight off of my shoulders by sharing the load of the climate crisis. And yes, let me tell you, it is evident that there is environmental destruction and trash in our oceans, but does that have to take away from your quality of life? It literally left me with burnout. I had no idea who I was because I spent every minute of my life campaigning against this thing that was based on science I hadn't even read. I thought that we were at the forefront of our human evolution, that our technology was the best it's ever been. And yet, everywhere I looked, I had depressed friends. I had anxiety pretty heavily myself. I looked around at how we lived, at our wasteful society, at how much I was stressed out all the time. And there were so many reasons why I just could not believe actually that that was true. So I began to get curious and ask, is this really the best it's ever been? There's a Native American quote that says, we are actually borrowing this earth from our children. We're just not distancing ourselves enough. We're not detaching enough to notice this and zoom out and see the larger picture. So as for the core beliefs and differences between both parties, number one is the view of human nature. The left primarily believe that people are shaped by their environment and their systems. They claim that inequality is often systemic, not personal failure. For example, the thought that homeless people or poverty is due to underfunded schools or racism or generational trauma. This concept fuels policies like affirmative action or universal basic income. And yes, there is a place and a time for it. But when it comes to stories and examples like when I was on a train, I saw a few too many families that had 5 to even 6 children and a baby and a toddler and another one in the carriage and another one behind. And they were all yelling and screaming and crying. And I understand travel is tricky, but it was clearly a pattern for the family. Both parents were not doing their job to be loving and giving undivided attention to their children. It begs the question, did they really want children? Or were they simply getting more benefits from the UK government according to each child they then had? Let me remind you that the definition of integrity, as I've come to know it in all of my study, is how you do anything is how you do everything. So you can tell how someone holds themselves, how someone speaks, how someone does something is exactly how they intend to carry on living the rest of their lives. So when someone doesn't pay full attention and give undivided love to a being, it makes me question their character. The right's view of human nature is the idea that people rise or fall according to their own decisions and effort. So the opinion that you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps instead of be handed welfare. And yes, I understand there's bunches of nepotism in the world, but that happens on either side of the spectrum. You can be given a position because of who you know rather than what you know, no matter what political party you're in. The right believe that how far you're going to get in life depends ultimately on what you think you're capable of, what you have faith in, and what you're determined to do and get to and challenge yourself by. They don't think that being limited systemically to only be able to reach a C on a math test as the highest grade is due to the class they're in, but rather truly their intelligence. And yes, I can see how that's not all true. If you're capped at a certain grade, it limits your potential, but all the more reason to fight for it, to ask for it, and to not stop. So the right believe that people are primarily responsible for their own outcomes. It all has to do with competition, hierarchy, and self-interest. The second belief is the role of government. The left believe that government should intervene to promote fairness, protect the vulnerable, and reduce inequality. Now, this begs the question for me, what is fairness? What is inequality? And are we truly taking care of the vulnerable when even children are just rising at an alarming percent because of the AI videos that can now be created. So I beg you not to post pictures of your children online. On the other hand, or on the other wing, the right believes that government should be limited. Its role is to maintain order, protect freedoms, and not overreach into personal or economic life. Think about it. Is it nice to have someone tell you what to do, when to do it, and even force you to actually have that done? Yes, we had parents, but we've grown up since then. I don't think that as an individuated and sovereign adult, we should worldwide want a parent above us, the governor of the mind. I'm watching a show right now about the FBI, and it is a little creepy to me to know that they would know every single address you've ever been to, every single tooth you've had pulled. They have all of your fingerprints and maybe even your eye scans. Our eyes tell us what our health is like. They have absolutely everything about you. Does that make you feel safe, or does that make you feel threatened? Most likely, if you're on the left, it'll make you feel at ease. They got me. They got me. And on the right, it'll probably make you feel a little bit uneasy. We know that we are unique people because they need to have all of these things to keep track of one person. Next, we have equality versus liberty. The left tends to prioritize equality of outcomes, ensuring everybody has similar life chances through redistribution and support. The left says often that billionaires shouldn't exist, that we should have a more progressive tax system, that the wealthy should be taxed even more in order to level economic playing fields. I get it because I was there. I used to think that the billionaires were just amassing the wealth of the poor and they were taking away from those who didn't have. Life is not pizza. It's not like you're taking a slice and therefore I have one less slice. We are here taking spoons to the ocean rather than at least a bucket. It is an endless abundance that it has to provide us if only we actually asked and challenged ourselves to try to become the person who generates wealth rather than bullying others who do have lunch money into handing it to us. This leads me to ask more questions. What is it that you're believing if you want to take wealth away from somebody? Why don't you believe that you can generate wealth yourself? If you are ever able to generate wealth yourself, why wouldn't you want to skyrocket and surpass the limit that you think you're capable of? Wouldn't you be angry if someone limited your cap of income? The politics of the right believes about equality and liberty, that freedom of opportunity should be prioritized. Success should result from merit, and outcomes will naturally differ. If you had a piggy bank and you worked all summer selling lemonade and washing other people's cars as a child, would you be happy if that was taken away from you at the end of it? Even if you invested it in something and your money was quadrupled, people just decided that all these other kids don't have any pocket money and you should share it with them. Do you think that's fair? What then if that was taken away from you? Next is the area of social change versus tradition. So this is the classic gender equality versus trad lives. The left embraces this change, they call it progress, and they re-examine traditions that perpetuate injustice. What are we determining injustice is, right? An example of this is how the left wants to rewrite school curricula in order to include more voices, such as Black history, LGBTQ plus figures, and generally reflects a desire to challenge dominant narratives. Now, I ask, why is that a dominant narrative in the first place? Yes, there is something to promoting and allowing change to occur in our world at large. In the last 2 decades or so, we have adjusted to technology so far and wide to be able to find more information and not from other people. I've learned more on YouTube than I have from my grandmother. I don't know about you, but I really do think that we were more connected before social media. And I think that we should really start wondering, why is it that we're wanting to change the narratives? On the right, they value tradition and stability and preserving cultural and religious heritage. They say that change should be cautious. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking your time with things. At least then you can be sure of it. The value of tolerance is, of course, very important. Each of us should be allowed to express ourselves as we desire. It is simply when it comes to, say, not protecting the children that I become incredibly wary. It is not nice, to say it kindly, to see these videos of transvestites reading books to children at school, celebrating their pride in front of these babies, and mothers clapping and inculcating these beliefs in very open minds. Our children have to be protected. I think I was taught sex ed far too early. I was 9 years old in third grade when we were told that we needed to know about boys' parts, and more than half of us were laughing more than half the time. There's no child that needs to be sat down in a classroom and looking at biology far before they've developed their sexual capacity. It is just not necessary yet. In due time, I trust that parents will do the right thing and speak to each child individually when they think it's right about their sexuality and about what's going to occur in your teen years. But again, 9 years old is far too early, let alone the fact that today we're doing it way earlier than that. When we start to bring in LGBTQ plus narratives and stories and graphic novels that are far too graphic for children to just take out of your library on their own accord, that is the point of taking our time with changing the narrative. The fifth area of belief is identity and justice. The left advocates for identity conscious politics, such as racial justice, LGBTQ plus rights, gender equality, to correct system bias. Now, this makes me think of how my friend was perfectly qualified. She was perfectly intelligent, perfectly interesting. She had all the grades and all the hobbies to admit her into Oxford, but unfortunately, because her friend was Black, she actually didn't have the grades, but she got in and my friend didn't. And it begs to question, Are we actually looking at skill, ability, desire, or are we looking at the appearance of things versus their true and inherent goodness? The DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, programs in universities and at workplaces apparently aim to address structural disadvantage and increase representation. I wonder if the university actually wants to increase its educational purpose or its virtue signaling. I wonder if the workplace wants to increase its annual revenue or be seen as 2025's best place to work. And yes, I understand. Socially speaking, LGBTQ people want to tell everybody that who they are is absolutely great and that they were born that way. That is absolutely respected. But I, as a person, do not need to parade alongside you in order for you to feel appreciated. And that is where I'm coming from. Each of us is already equal and respected if only we would allow things to just be the way they are. It's actually your resistance that creates persistence of the problem. As for the racial justice concept, I have plenty of Black friends and Latin friends and Asian friends and worldwide friends who come from all different places. Even if they look a certain race, they were actually culturally from a different place. And that is the beauty of today. And I accept that and I celebrate that because I would be nothing without Mexican culture. This is where I personally grew up. I think system bias can be corrected by celebrating and enjoying each of our stories exactly where we come from, rather than perpetually fighting against the constant narrative, which will automatically, I think, tell itself. The right favors identity neutral policies. They think everyone should be treated the same, without special protections or advantages. There was a video that went viral a few years ago of some men who were making a competition. They said that they were giving away cash to the person who reached them first. Now, they were on one side of a field, and the lineup of young people that they found were on the other. And then they told them that you could take one step forward if your parents were in a stable financial position while you were growing up. You could take one step forward if you went to college. You could take one step forward, so on and so forth. You had certain privileges and you had certain advantages. They wanted to illustrate the difference between white people and Black people. There were plenty of Black people who were on the first line and plenty of white people who were further along. And I understand again that position of I'm at a disadvantage versus I was already given this platform from the moment I was born. So in this situation, do you see how it's nicer to actually have that right point of view? Everybody starts on the first line instead of a few steps ahead. And I gotta hand it to them. It was actually the people who were on the first line that ended up closest to the money at the end and won, because they run faster than everybody else. So is it actually about where you're at the start, or is it about how much you're willing to dig deep and fire up to move forward? Because on the right, critics of the DEI program and programs like it actually violate meritocracy and treat people differently based on identity, which they ultimately oppose in favor of colorblind or gender neutral policies. Next, we have globalism versus nationalism. The left tends to favor cooperation, open borders, and global responsibility. Their global responsibility is shown according to their support of, say, the Paris Agreement and other climate programs, as well as refugee resettlement programs. Now, when you're stuck in a mindset of lack and a mindset of fear that I was also stuck in when I was more based on the left and against the climate crisis and all of these things, it very much puts you in this fear position of what about those that are estranged from their own land and their own families by the war? What about asylum seekers? What about the mothers and the children? What about the men that are having to learn a new language or reinsert themselves into a new culture? There's so much to be said here because, again, we think that that person cares as much as I do to generate and nurture certain values in who they are, to have a specific integrity and an essence that is nice to be around and be civilized. You have to do your own research. I personally also wanted to open my country to all of the asylum seekers that were begging to please be let in because their home was just destroyed by a bomb. That is so scary to think about. Absolutely. I agree. But here is the real question. Would you be willing to open your home door to a stranger or even a family of strangers? There's a father, his wife, their two sons, and maybe a baby as well. And they're standing at your door, and you're going to let them straight in. You're going to let them eat at your table. You're going to let them take up the guest bedroom, or if you don't have one, your children are going to sleep with you in your bedroom, and they're going to take your child's bedroom. Is this the kind of life that you want to keep leading, one where you share all of your own personal territory. People with different cultures, different languages, different customs, different intentions are at our doorstep. Yes, I would share my house if it was just too hard emotionally. If they ate different food than I did and we had to cook in the kitchen, it would be very hard to do for a long amount of time. And I have to think of what that's letting my children believe. Are they being taught how to live as best they can by having people in our home that aren't a good influence on them? Oh, but Julia, you're assuming that they're not a good influence. Well, yeah, if they are, that's great. But if they're not, what do we do about it? When I started to see what this really meant, I began to take on the belief of the right. They prioritize national interest, border control, and national sovereignty over global obligations. They call to withdraw from global treaties or impose tariffs, all of which reflects a focus on patriotism, which is the love for one's country. So, on the one hand, we have this love for new culture, new traditions, new languages, new people, whether they are a good influence or a bad influence on our children. And on the other hand, we have this knowledge that we tell children every day, don't speak to strangers. You don't know what they're like. You don't know what their intentions are. And until we know what their intentions are, why should we allow them in to our place where we are no longer protected? When I was about 16 years old, I saw an article in National Geographic that showed very clearly what all people would look like by the year 2050. And honestly, just the concept that we wouldn't look very different scared me. The beauty of having different cultures is exactly what diversity celebrates. So I ask you, what about the day that we no longer have that diversity to celebrate? If we do not protect the differences that we have as they are, if we don't protect the Irish accent, if we don't protect Native American stories, if we don't protect Asian food, if we don't protect Mexican dance, what diversity will we have left to celebrate? I'm going to leave that there because I have so much more that I can say on this. Next, we have the moral framework, where the left believes that morality is often rooted in empathy, inclusion, and justice for the marginalized. It is often rooted in compassion, that they want to include trans rights and prison reform and have racial equity. It all comes from this general sense of feeling and emotion and acting without truly weighing out the difficulties of the decision. The whole point of leading a well-adjusted life is of having both the balance of the heart with the head. And so the right is a little bit more on the logical side alone. They say morality is often rooted in personal responsibility, in order, in duty, and in traditional roles, such as family and faith. They enjoy promoting law and order and traditional marriage roles, like the man at work and the woman at home in the kitchen and with the child, and abstinence-based education, rather than the left believing that you can sleep with anybody and have feminism and that is all under the guise of empowerment. The right thinks that it's not. It's the opposite. Chastity and purity, they claim, are more important, all of which reflects a framework of duty, order, and moral absolutes. Now, of course, morality is ultimately not an absolute. There is no such thing as this is good and this is bad, or vice versa. It is always due to that nuanced action. What is right for me in this situation, weighing out the pros and cons according to what I feel and what I think. But not just me. Also, what does my best version of me think is right for these things? Because if we base permanent decisions on temporary feelings, we are looking at regret and resentment. So, in summary, the left wing core beliefs are that society should work toward equality and justice and collective well being, even if it requires systemic change. The right wing core belief is that individuals thrive best with freedom, tradition, and personal responsibility with minimal government interference. Here is what I think we have that unites us no matter what side of politics we're on. We both want equal respect and dignity. Regardless of gender or race or background, we want to be valued equally. Not seen as less intelligent, less capable, or less worthy just because of those things. So it's not about being a certain thing that you're told you should be or have to be, but actually just being treated as human. And what that would give us is respect in the workplace and in places in society, and ultimately just that tolerance that we're able to work amongst one another no matter what we look like or what we choose. Equal opportunities. People want the chance to rise without any barriers according to what they have chosen in the past or where they have come from. A woman may want to pursue a position of leadership without being labeled bossy. A man may want to be a stay-at-home dad without judgment, and a non-binary person wants a role that affirms their identity and strengths. The freedom to be authentic. At the heart of gender equality is the freedom from rigid roles. Women want to be strong without losing their softness. Men want to be vulnerable without being seen as weak. Everyone wants to live in truth without shame or judgment. So I'm going to give you another question. Are we perpetuating the shame and the judgment on our own? Shared responsibility and partnership. In home life and parenting and life itself, people don't want a 50-50 split, but they want a mutual investment of energy and care and support. Women don't want to carry the invisible load of emotional labor alone. And men want to be included and trusted in emotional and nurturing roles. A voice that matters. People want to be heard and taken seriously in decisions and policies and personal relationships. They don't want to be talked over or silenced or dismissed because of gender norms. They just want to put their point across and be respected while doing so. The right to thrive, not just survive. All of us want access to joy and purpose and fulfillment, not just permission to participate, but support to flourish, to thrive, considering this is our one and only life. We want to be seen and heard and respected and treated as human and be part of something and be fully invested in it and be able to express ourselves how we want to. Now, here's the real question. Are you perpetuating my truth, or are you standing on the foundation of the truth, which actually never has to be defended? It just is. People don't want to keep arguing about differences between anything. We just want a world where our differences are honored, not used as a reason to be limited or devalued or oppressed in any way. Equality is not about sameness. It's about freedom and fairness and fullness of life. It is not about uniformity. It is about unity. So until we can celebrate that in order to keep diversity alive for the rest of our lives and our children's lives and every generation after that, we won't be able to tell how we're actually very much on the same page as a global society. And we have so many more similarities to our neighbor than we have differences. We all feel, we all have insecurities, we all have a past, we all have stories, we all have hopes, we all have potentials that we want to be able to live into. And we don't need to be each other's enemy. And that will come to you naturally when you start to get curious about where we're at and discover truly who our common enemy is. So I'm going to leave it there. Well, I want to tell you about the difference between intention and impact. So intention is what you're meaning to do or say, and impact is how what you did and said actually affected somebody else. Intention matters because it shows your inner motivation or character, whether you're kind or have ignorance or whether you have malice. It helps determine if harm was accidental or deliberate. Your intention can ultimately guide accountability and next steps. Do you need education, an apology, discipline? An example of this is you tell a joke intending to be funny and friendly. So why impact matters more than intent in practice is because regardless of your intention, the other person experiences the outcome. Ignoring impact can cause harm to be dismissed or repeated, and centering only on intent can sound like deflecting responsibility, because your joke then unintentionally hurts someone, triggering shame or exclusion. So balancing both is key. This is what intention without impact looks like. I didn't mean it, so it shouldn't matter. This comes off as dismissive or defensive, and the focus is on excusing behavior. Whereas impact without intention sounds like this: you hurt me, so you're a bad person. This ignores complexity and growth, and the focus is centering harm without room for nuance. So a healthy response here is, I didn't intend to hurt you, but I see that I did. I'm sorry, and I want to understand better. So basically, intent explains your motives, impact explains your effect, and mature accountability honors both. So what I need to stress the most is that we were never actually meant to be a global nation. We were actually intended to have our separate cultures, our separate customs, our separate histories, our separate beliefs, because we each do culturally have in this diverse world that we celebrate on both sides, left and right, beauty in our differences. Our relationships were meant to be as large as a tribe, 100, maybe 200 maximum, different people that we know in our village that support us, and we develop those relationships with. Now, won't we have so many more mutual understandings foundationally when we have the very same tribe that grew up with us and that they grew up in the same land, the same environment, with the same practices and the same religion, versus having many different arguments about which of each of those bullet points is best? This is, unfortunately, the depth and nuance of what globalism has created for us. A plethora of different voices and opinions being heard constantly, and the news reminds us of this daily. We were not meant to actually nurture and generate relationships with every single person across the globe. We were meant to only do it with those who already have very close beliefs to the ones that we've developed. So we will be going back and forth on intent versus impact every single day with different people if we keep trying to wrap ourselves into a society that has to be uniform. This is why unity comes from realizing that we all have the very same intent. It is simply our impact that is delivered differently. And if a different tribe takes on a different impact than was the intent, to take accountability for, am I a person who is prone to feel shame and to feel hurt? And am I just looking for another story or another opinion on which to pin this blame rather than looking at myself in the mirror? They say to treat others as you would like to be treated. Honor your story. Take self responsibility in realizing, how am I feeling and am I perpetuating that story for myself according to where I am living politically? I know this was a different video this week, but I am so glad to finally bring you the real motivation for why femininity has meant everything to me. Until next week, as my grandma always said, harden not your heart, love and serve each other.